Let us pray. Gracious God, we give thanks for this day and the possibility of your word made manifest in our midst. We pray that you will bring our hearts and mind into this space, somehow turn the fragility of human speech, hard of listening hearts, failed words into your word proclaimed. It is the name of all that's sacred, holy, and true that we do pray. Amen. Amen. Tina is 20. Before she ever really heard the story of her mother and her mother's courage told in a different tenor. She faintly remembers being out of sorts and something kind of disturbing her equilibrium when she was younger, but she was so young that the memories have faded, to be frank. Tina always remembers her mother telling her Tina, always show up for what you need. Believe that it's yours, Tina, and know whose you are, Tina. But she never quite knew why her mother was so insistent about these things. People used to mutter about her mother, but she never quite knew why. They used to say, well, you know, she was a difficult woman. She never quite backed down in the face of no. She never took no for an answer. People whispered and blasted her mother as ornery, stubborn, loud, a confused millennial maybe. But Tina never heard the full story. She only heard remnants, bits and pieces, snippets and construed details. And certainly, no, she never heard the story told to her like it was told to her by her Aunt Tasha. On this day, I can almost hear Tasha recounting what happened the day she witnessed her sister Sharon, Tina's mother, double down for the sake of Tina's life and her own. Tasha began the story with, you know, your mother would not take no for an answer. You were so unwell, Tina. She could not take no for an answer. See, Tasha began the story with Sharon was so misunderstood, Tina. She did not begin the story with your mother was so ungrateful, demanded too much, or should be content that she was allowed to be a part of this great storied country in the first place. No, this is not the way Tasha began the story. She did not begin the story with Jesus understood what was happening, did not really mean to insult Sharon, and was simply making a point for the crowd. No, Tasha told the story from her sister's perspective. Because Tasha had to begin in this story as her sister began in this story. Now, I cannot really tell the story exactly as Tasha told the story to her niece about her mother, but I can hear enough of the echoes and the bits and the pieces of being misunderstood that I think it demands us to reimagine how our hearts listen to the gospel of this story before us this afternoon. We are reminded about the significance of perspective, location, and where one is situated in these interconnected pieces of life that we see in the text. We might hear overtures of the gospel anew if, from the sidelines, we do not look first at Jesus nor the disciples, but instead look at the one who is fundamentally misunderstood and virtually dismissed and yet persists anyway. If we begin with Sharon, we can almost feel the pressure pushing in on her as she presses her uninvited body into the space that Jesus and his friends were occupying. I have to wonder if she sensed that being uninvited and unwelcome were the same thing. Sharon peeps that Jesus is in her area. She then begins roaming the streets until she finds him. When she spots him, she starts shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. Did y'all hear that? Right from her lips flowed the belief of her heart. She believes Jesus to be the awaited one. She calls him Son of David, code for you're the one. You're the Savior folk have been waiting for, writing about, and teaching about. Other folks have doubted, but I believe that you are the one, Jesus. Faith isn't tangible. You can't touch it. You can't see it. You can't taste it. And yet, you can sense it. You know it when you're in the presence of it. Not only does Sharon believe that Jesus is the one that his people have been waiting on, she believes that he will have mercy on her, a Gentile woman. It's one thing to believe something, and it's another thing to know that what you believe has some implications. Sharon is putting her trust in the add-ons, the benefits, the implications of what it means that Jesus is the awaited Messiah. So as she confesses her belief in Jesus, she hopes in the mercy that travels the road with Jesus. Sharon says, I know if Jesus is the awaited one and the anointed one, then mercy surely follows the path with Jesus. If Jesus is the Messiah and mercy walks along with him, then hoping to hook up with God's mercy, I am willing to run down Main Street, screaming my head off with my hands up, because right now I am in need of God's intervening mercy. Sharon is in need of the intervening mercy because she, a Gentile woman, is counted among the least by the walls that press in on her. She's counted among the least because of the complexion of her skin, the texture of her hair, because of the shape of her hips and the size of her lips. Sharon isn't outright entitled to anything because of the texture of her hair, the complexion of her skin, and the shape of her hips and the size of her lips. She knows what they think. But as she knows what they think, she also has a need. So she plays off of mercy. Mercy, I know you don't have to. I know there's no reason for you to. I know that you are fully justified not to within the confines of this playing field. But if you could just turn and look at me, Jesus. If you could just turn your heart towards my voice, that would be enough for me. Sharon, an outsider, entitled to nothing, is banking on mercy, and I think we see her taking action. She hopes so much that she is willing to do something. At some point, our conviction and action have to hook up. Yes. We aren't witnessing lackadaisical faith that sits by hoping and waiting on God in our text this afternoon. This is faith that is vibrantly moves, but it isn't any kind of movement. It's risky and it's honest. Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David, because my daughter is demon possessed. Have mercy on me, Son of David, because Tina is demon possessed. Now, demon possession is a tricky business for us these days. We still don't know how to fully talk about it or what to do with it on some days. Some days we over-spiritualize it, and some days we over-intellectualize it. Some days we call things demons that aren't demons at all, and some days we fail to call out the outright demonic. One thing that seems to be clear is that there is some external force perceived as evil and unsettling at its core that is pressing in on the body, mind, and spirit of the one who is bone of Sharon's bone and flesh of Sharon's flesh. Her daughter's well-being has been disturbed, equilibrium thrown off, life all out threatened. And if Tina is disturbed, Sharon is disturbed. If Tina is not well, Sharon is not well. I have to wonder if the pressure of living as separate but not equal compounds the conditions of evil that gnaws at the life of Tina. You know, that which has been absorbed into the DNA of her aunties, uncles, and grandmothers, or maybe it is that which enables the poor to be with us always in the land, even though there need not be poor existing with us always in the land with an abundance of resources. I don't know, but maybe these things are what have now landed on Tina's vulnerable body and are wreaking havoc in her very home. There comes a point in time when our pursuit of God, our desire for the intervention of God here on earth will force us to stop policing our reputations and those of others. Every once in a while, our deepest convictions may require us to take some hits on the side of public relations for what we truly need. But let's be clear. There's one type of risk for those of us who've never really been on the underside. And there's another type of risk for those who are always on the underside. There's a different tenor, and it is difficult when you've always been on the underside of the public image to be honest about what's wreaking havoc on your mind and your body. It is difficult when you're constantly negotiating your respectability because of the lies and stereotypes others have touted: no good, no count, lazy, angry, thug, unintelligent, unintelligible, dangerous, dysfunctional, inept, inadequate, uncouth, overly emotional. The risks are real here. And yet Sharon takes the streets, hands up, takes the knee, and cries out anyway. Dear God, my baby is being destroyed. Have mercy on her, please. And here is where the misunderstandings begin. The reporters, the bystanders, and the interlopers get it wrong. The facts are contorted and a diversion ensues. The disciples say, "Send her away. She keeps shouting after us." She must have been acting an all-out fool because the disciples are irritated and clearly confused. She was kind of creating distraction for them or something. She is continuously crying out, trying to get the attention of Jesus, and those around her are irritated and have confused Sharon's pursuit of life and well-being as a pursuit of them that interferes and infringes upon their well-being. They have confused Sharon's pursuit of life and well-being as something that interferes and infringes upon their own well-being. But it's not just the disciples that seem to be tripping in the moment. I know y'all love Jesus. We're going to end loving Jesus, but right now the disciples are not the only tripping ones. Jesus doesn't even respond to Sharon at first. The text states, but he did not answer her at all. Not one word, Jesus. Not one word. And when he finally speaks up, it rings as a response of irritation of his disciples as he talks at Sharon about his mission as opposed to attending to her need. Did y'all see it? I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, Sharon. Translation, I ain't here for you, Sharon. Sharon has been saying, this thing has been trying to take my daughter over, causing confusion in my household. I'm begging for you to do something, and Jesus responds, not your turn, Sharon. He said that his mission was to this group over here, not to Sharon, a Gentile woman. Individuals are talking across one another and at Sharon and do not fully understand the seeds of Sharon's cries, the belief in the right to God-given life. Being misunderstood never exists outside the realm of someone else's inability to comprehend or interpret our actions. The disciples misconstrued their place in relation to Jesus. Send her away. She keeps crying after us. And it seems as if Jesus interprets Sharon as a distraction to his ministry and mission. I have to wonder if the one we claim is fully divine and fully human had his humanity registering at full capacity in this moment on this afternoon. Maybe we forget that Jesus was fully human and fully divine. Maybe Jesus forgot that he too was a part of the disinherited of the land. Whatever the internal conflict about the mission that's dwelling within Jesus, it bubbles outward as he misunderstands this woman's request and statement as a question to be bartered and negotiated. So the bartering and negotiation begins. You have put me off, Jesus. Sorry, you may be put off by Jesus right now. If you're not, I am. I'm a little put off by Jesus right now. But Sharon is not put off. Motivated, believing, hoping, Sharon doubles down on mercy once again and engages Jesus. As I listened to Tasha a while ago retell the story of her sister and Tina's mother, Sharon's response rang as one that said, whether you're talking to me, Jesus, or at me, Jesus, I now have your attention, Lord. All I needed was to catch your ear. And after she catches his ear, verse 25 shows her coming down and getting right in Jesus' line of sight, saying, Lord, help me. At me, about me, I have your ear. Lord, help me. I don't need you to promise an answer yet, but if you could just look at me. Just look at me, Jesus, and it might move your compassion. You didn't even ask me my name, but that's okay. Just look at me, Jesus. The sister is hoping in mercy, and she is persistent in this hope. But I almost missed her brilliance. I've almost missed her brilliance. Sharon says, I got to make sure he sees me. He hears me, but does he see me for who I am? It reminds me of hearing the saints of old singing, come see about me, Lord, come see about me. They weren't asking God to do anything yet. They were just asking the Lord, just come look over this way. Just come look over this way and see about me. The saints believed that there was something about who they were and about who God was, that if God just came over and gave a glance, if God just came over and gave a look, there was some connection between God and the saints that was similar to a mother having compassion on their child. The saints were brilliant. Sharon is brilliant. It seems she understands who she was. She says, Lord, help me. Me. Sharon will not be restricted to a box or a category, Gentile, Canaanite. It's not the complexion of her skin. It's not the shape of her hips or the size of her lips or who mama was or who daddy was or wasn't. This is a help me, the one who is also created by God. Sharon is marked out as the creation of God. She possesses the image of God. So my imagination just runs when I see this scene in the text. She has the mark of the divine all over her. The breath of God resides all in her. Then God said, let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness. And so God created humankind in God's image. Male and female, God created them. I have to believe that Sharon knew who she was. She knew who her daughter was. And as the Messiah, she knew who Jesus was. As Sharon goes and gets in Jesus' line of sight, it feels as though she just caught Jesus' attention to me. Jesus, the one who we believe is the in-flesh revelation of divinity and truth. Jesus, the one who we call God incarnate. Jesus, the one who we believe walked this earth as both human and divine. This Jesus is now standing and looking at this Sharon. Sharon, a human being who bears the image of God. Sharon, the human being created in the image of God. Jesus, who has God in him, is now standing and looking at Sharon, who has God in her. I can see her saying on the inside, I see you, Jesus. Do you see me? I see you, Jesus. Do you see me? Jesus has sparkles of divinity wrapped in flesh. Sharon has sparkles of divinity wrapped in flesh. And it's almost as though he has to see the reflections of himself as he looks in the eyes of Sharon. The God in Jesus, I have to imagine, is now forced to see the God in Sharon. And how can God turn away from God? We say that God can't turn away from God. I have to imagine that Sharon knew that she and Jesus were connected. So that's fine. Don't answer me, Jesus, but I'm going to ask you one more time. Lord, help me. I'm going to make sure you see me. So yes, faith will compel you to act in the face of great odds and risks being understood. But in order to take the risk, we have to understand and know who we are as the created of God. Even when others try to dismiss or discount or deny us. When we have a deep conviction about who we are, who God is, and who you are in relation to God, nothing can stop you from pursuing the fullness of the promises of God right here on earth. There is a difference between being willing to persistently seek God and being willing to struggle with God. Struggling takes on a different effort, a different tenor. Struggling says, I know God could intervene from the outside, but sometimes God doesn't intervene from the outside. Struggling says, I live faith on the ground, not faith over yonder in the by and by. But that's okay, because there is a piece of God already residing within me. So I know that if I show up, God is showing up. Folks pick cotton and pull tobacco, moaning, come down Moses, because they were willing to struggle with God for the promises of God. People marched on Washington because they were willing to struggle with God for the promises of God. King lost his life because he was willing to struggle for the promises of God. The depression doesn't leave, but you keep pressing anyway. God didn't take the cancer away, but you are still struggling with God for the promises of God. So Sharon moves are no longer about getting Jesus' attention. It's about entering an exchange with Jesus for the manifestation of God's will and promise. And this exchange takes place right in the public square. Right in the public square. It's personal, it's social, and it's political. Sharon's willingness to enter the struggle in word and in action, I have to believe, helped pull forth Jesus' divinity in this moment as their humanity touched in real time. The circumstances have been created for the holy to emerge, for truth to emerge right there in their midst. Jesus' ministry is about to be expanded. The vision of God is about to be realized, all because this woman was willing to enter an exchange, to struggle alongside of Jesus for the manifestation of God's promise. We begin seeing the human and divine pulling in Jesus. I see it. It's in the text. He can stick to his mission, or he can respond to the God in Sharon that is pulling on the God in him. We begin seeing the tension that's in Jesus because of this quandary. Jesus moves from, I am here for you, to, but it's not fair, Sharon. It's not fair. Jesus moves from yes and no to, but there's this thing. I don't know. It's not fair. As if Sharon is pulling him and he's at least compelled, summoned, and called to enter into this dialogue with her. All because Sharon was speaking and moving, doubling down on mercy. It's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. It's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. As much as we want to get around it, we can't. Jesus has just likened this woman to a dog. He has just called Sharon an animal, something that does not have the capacity to reason, is instinctual in nature, dirty and unclean. Ouch, Jesus. that had to sting, but he's struggling. He's struggling. He's willing to wrestle with her. And Sharon had the nerve to respond and say, yes. Yeah, that's me. And as soon as I was up in arms, Tasha, Sharon's sister, took me aside and said, don't get offended too quickly, Lisa. Don't get offended too quickly, because now what folks really think is in the atmosphere. See, this is what they really think about us Gentiles, right? We're considered dogs, pagans, unclean, unfit, not a part of the outright blessings of God. Oh, that's just those people over there. But now that it has been spoken, the power of the unspoken has been removed. And now that it's out here and folk are being truthful and honest, we have something to work with. Now, since it's actually been said, we can stop fighting problems that folk claim don't exist. Before, instead of saying how really they felt out loud, they moved the public auction block of slavery to the silent auction block of prison. They discarded and herded our bodies like livestock, claiming we just commit more crimes. Before, instead of saying how they really felt, they slowly moved our shops, restaurants, grocery stores, and housing they knew we couldn't afford. So eventually we had to move out the neighborhood. But now that it's in the atmosphere, now that it's been said, we have something with which we can work. So Tasha says, no, Lisa, don't you be put off by Sharon, because she's about to start her work right here. And as Jesus is turning on his heels, I can see him. She just said true. Yes, that's me, turning on his heels. Sharon says, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. I rarely do this, but I feel like it's important. There is a distinction here that comes up in the labeling. As in verse 27, when Sharon invokes the word kunaria, which refers to a house dog, as opposed to the wild dogs who are out there running in the streets. Sharon says, I may be a dog, but I'm going to tell you whose dog I am. So Sharon takes that what they wanted to say about her, kind of empties it a little bit and begins redefining it a little bit, that I'm going to tell you exactly how my dogginess is defined. I'm a house dog, Jesus. I'm still a part of the household, and at minimum, I'm entitled to the crumbs that fall from the table of the household. This is God's house, and Jesus, if you are God, then you are the master of this house technically, and you can give me some of those crumbs. I get to eat the crumbs, and I'm cool with crumbs. Don't be put off by the crumbs, because our crumbs and God's crumbs are not the same crumbs. I can see Jesus reflecting a little bit and thinking about those 12 baskets of crumbs he picked up after feeding the 4,000. Before encountering Sharon. And then maybe in the next chapter, when he begins picking up the 7 basketfuls of crumbs after feeding the 4,000 or 5,000, Jesus might be thinking about Sharon. The crumbs are the overflow of God's outright blessing, more than enough, opening the windows of heaven, more than you'll ever be able to receive. Yeah, Sharon begins doing some defining. It seems that Sharon's connection to her daughter, Tina, would not allow her to back off. Jesus. There was something about her thriving that was connected to her daughter's thriving and her daughter's personhood. Personhood connecting to personhood, blood connected to blood, bones connected to bones, flesh of flesh. If her daughter suffered, she suffered. If her daughter thrived, she thrived. In the face of being misunderstood, rejected, publicly humiliated, she kept right on screaming. In the face of empire, false lines that were etched in stone, borders that were pliable yet impenetrable, Sharon cried anyway. But likewise, there is something about Sharon and her daughter's thriving that's connected to the flourishing and continuation of the hopes of God. There comes a point in life when the rubber finally meets the road, and we are willing to risk being misunderstood, because the risk of being silent outweighs the risk that we take in being vocal and present. There are days when putting our bodies, voices, and resources in place might cause public scrutiny, but nevertheless, we are called to do so for the promises of God. Yes. And ultimately, this risk of being misunderstood is worth it, because there is something that hangs in the balance if we choose silence, or our false protection, or complacency for the sake of survival instead of thriving. We paint Jesus as the consummate, passionate one, compassionate one, unyielding in love, and willing to go above and beyond. But we struggle with that image of Jesus right now. Today, Jesus lays before us our struggle as humanity, to enter in where the divine beckons, for all that's holy, to call out to all that's holy in the midst of our human fragility. This faith is dicey. It requires a risky yet faithful response and presence. There are no guarantees other than the hope of God's prevailing promise, namely that the blessing of God is to be made manifest for the entire creation of God. From whose point of view will we listen and struggle for the gospel to be made manifest today? God bless you. Amen.